By the end of this video, you will know how to keep your reader hooked from the first to the last word. The secret is understanding the dopamine system. In fact, I would venture to say that all art is about dopamine regulation. And these principles apply to everything that you might do, from planning the perfect day to composing a symphony. You can keep your reader hooked, but only if you have this system in mind throughout your writing process. Now, I got the idea for this video from listening to the Huberman Lab podcast, run by Stanford professor Andrew Huberman. He has an episode on the dopamine system. Dopamine is a molecule that enhances our motivation to go seek rewards. It expands our desire and effort to obtain what we want. There are dopamine triggers in the external environment that provide an immediate feel-good sensation as well as anticipation of further rewards. Let's take ice cream as a good example. Now, that first scoop gives you the immediate hit of pleasure, but you know that second scoop is yet to come. I was listening to this episode and thought about applying this understanding to create compelling writing. I'll first set out two principles before applying this understanding to all aspects of writing a piece. Principle 1. Balance consistency and surprise. You want enough consistency to create a sense of flow. The reader believes in that forward motion of progress towards some end. Two easy ways of doing this are firstly to maintain a consistent narrative voice, and secondly, keep your writing as simple as possible. Eliminate any unnecessary complexity on the way to that goal. But you also need to balance out this consistency, otherwise it gets a little bit boring. So you want to throw in variety as a form of reward. A good example of this actually comes from music, from the Phantom of the Opera, and the song is Think of Me. That has a big surprise high note after quite a lot of consistent melody. Check out the full video of that to understand what I mean. On the other hand, too much variety and the reader wonders where this is going. You jump around from place to place rather than heading in a straight line towards your purpose. Principle 2. Set up milestones. This is just like a workout routine. You will have your ultimate goal perhaps at the end of the month, and then each week you will have gradually escalating milestones of fitness that you want to achieve. The same goes for writing. You want to reveal information bit by bit. Set up these milestones of understanding that give the reader those mini rewards and anticipation of greater reward when they reach the end of the chapter or ultimately the end of the story. If you have too much information at the start, then the reader gets bogged down in complexity, wondering when they are going to get that reward and whether it will be worth it in the end. However, if you stack the biggest reward at the start, it leads to a big low in the aftermath. For example, if you started a meal with a dessert, you're not going to be that keen to move on to the main course. Those are the two big principles then. The first one, balance consistency and surprise, and the second one, set up milestones. Let's apply this to all aspects of writing, from top to bottom, starting with the whole story outline. You want to structure your entire piece with the dopamine system firmly in mind. The first source of motivation, the most important, is caring about the character. This is the first priority for any opening because that generates all the motivation to stick with this character's story until the end. Secondly, you want to slowly escalate the tension, increase the stakes. You care about the character and the reward they are ultimately after, but it is not guaranteed that they will get there. Ultimately, you want to create a mixture of mini rewards and setbacks that gradually build over the course of the piece. That is how to fully engage the dopamine system throughout. Now, what about the major setback? The big obstacle that the character faces around 2/3 of the way through a story. This may seem to pose a big risk when it comes to the dopamine system, because the writing slows, maybe becomes more reflective, and the character needs to slowly build up their resolve or their skill set before the final showdown. But it doesn't crash the dopamine system for a couple of reasons. Firstly, hopefully you've built up that empathy for the character, that caring about their ultimate outcome, so your reader stays with them through this low, slow period. Secondly, this major setback almost functions like an economic principle. What it does is makes the ultimate reward scarcer, harder to achieve. It puts it in uncertainty. And when that happens, you value attaining that reward even more. That is the story outline. You also want to flow these principles down to the chapter level. In each chapter at the start, you want to ask yourself, what is the reward in this chapter? What is the setback that increases the value and difficulty of attaining that reward? And how are you going to pace the action for that steady release of dopamine? Turning to each page, you can look at both the paragraphs and the sentences. In the first sentence of the paragraph, you want to signal that potential reward that has to come in the final sentence. Ideally, you also want to use that final sentence to open up curiosity about the next paragraph. You want to answer one question and then pose another at the same time. We can go into even more detail. There is a mantra in writing that the purpose of every sentence is to get the reader to move on to the next. Every sentence ideally should provide that little reward and that little incentive to keep going, but don't overthink it too much. The final part, of course, is the ending. Here, you want to activate mainly a different molecule, serotonin. You want the reader to experience a serotonin wave, a feeling of satisfaction with what they have already achieved. There should be no unanswered questions, and the conflict should be fully resolved. But I think you do also want some dopamine at the end. All good writing enhances your desire for life, to see and do. It gives you a deeper understanding of the world that you want to go out and apply. You need some of that motivation at the end. In this vein, I tend to think of that scene from the movie Silver Linings Playbook, where he's reading the ending to A Farewell to Arms, which is a pretty devastating, negative surprise, and just immediately flings the book out the window. He has this rush of energy because he cares about what he has read and what it means for how he wants to live. I've spoken in a previous video about some of the misuses of the dopamine system in modern society, especially in relation to phone addiction. Now, I think we're in a different camp here. I hope people feel that reading and art in general are worthwhile ways to spend their time. Understanding the dopamine system means that you are giving them the best possible value with your writing. As always, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts in the comments section, and if you want more content that blends the art of living with the art of writing, you can subscribe. See you next week.